I suppose it's seeing some need and hoping to find a way to help solve it.
I guess I view it as something that we voluntarily, or in my case involuntarily, took responsibility for a short period of time to help out.
I think it implies some kind of class or position inequality or asymmetry, and might kind of suggest a noblesse oblige.
Service is something that one does as a activity that is beyond oneself for the benefit of something beyond yourself.
I think it's seeing the bigger picture, beyond your personal needs, your personal desires, and even beyond your immediate family sometimes.
A service approach really is like putting a Band-Aid over a scar.
In service learning, we really distance ourselves from the term service because of the negative connotations. We ask our students to think a lot about it. If you're entering into a relationship in a service learning context, what would it mean to you to be the one being served, right? Do you want to be served?
Mennonite service has been shaped a lot by the wars that have engaged the United States over the 20th century. So in World War I, Mennonite young men who were opposed to military service for religious reasons, some were incarcerated, some were treated quite badly in various ways. A few were killed because of their strong feelings about that. But it also meant that Mennonites began to see that service outside their community could be something that was important to them. And indeed, in World War II, the government accepted to have civilian public service system set up so that young men otherwise called to the draft could have an alternative service.
This was in 1967. We could not imagine there not being a draft. Now, if you were part of a pacifist church, like the Mennonites, Quakers, Brethren, or Amish, you would then register at age 18, but as a conscientious objector, which is what I did.
When I was a junior in college, this was a time during the war. There were few men here, very few. Most of them I knew were conscientious objectors. And so a group of us women decided we ought to find out what it's like to work like that. And so we went up to Ypsilanti, Michigan, and worked in the rather extensive mental institution there at the time.
I was a house parent in an orphanage in West Berlin, Germany, with little boys between the ages of 5 and 9. These boys were physically handicapped and mentally handicapped.
And it was usually only 2 or 3 of us there with 60 people. It was stimulating. It was an eye-opener.
And I just got to love these little guys. And they would start jumping up and down every time I'd walk into the room, and they'd get excited. And of course, that was just, that would just make, that would just make my day. And I just looked forward so much to going to work, to being with these guys. At some point, I began to ask myself the very question you're asking me. Am I giving more than I'm receiving? Am I receiving more than I'm giving? And in the end, I really felt like I was receiving more than I was giving.
I think that most people that are involved in service, both international and in our country, would not really agree with the idea that there's a giving and a receiving. Many people that are bringing some kind of expertise into a situation, we recognize that we are actually receiving as much as we are giving. It can be something as simple as getting involved in relationships that we hadn't foreseen, or it can be as deep as really having our ideas of what service means be challenged and be shaped.
The hyphen in service learning, as we use it, to indicate the importance of both sides of the equation. Yes, there's a service component. It's something that everybody has identified as something the community wants or needs. The learning that comes out of it is at least equally important and involves taking the time to reflect on the experiences and taking the time to be in an authentic relationship with the people with whom you're working, and often making sure that the ways that we think about our work are related back to some kind of conceptual framework.
The Army has 7 values, loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service is one of our values, along with honor, integrity, and personal courage. And they really harp on the selfless service to where it's not about you, it's about the others around you and helping other people and serving your country.
I was going to be drafted. I was in graduate school, married, no children, and my draft status was changed from 2S, which is student deferment, to 1A, which is eligible for the draft. And I was so uneasy about going into the Army that I enlisted in the Air Force before the Army could get me.
There were many things that President Nixon did that were bad. He did some things that were good. The worst thing he did, in my opinion, was he abolished the draft and made it a totally volunteer Army. And, after that happened, a few years after I finished my service, now it was just a different world. You didn't have to think anymore when you were growing up of where you would serve for 2 years. After high school or after college, to have to put in 2 years of service somewhere, either for the military or services I did. That's something that is totally missing right now that young people don't have, and I think it's their loss. And now you have kids coming out of high school. They don't have a direction. They don't have to do a service anywhere. What do they do? Many of them don't know what to do. Or if they go to college and then they finish college in 4 years, then what?
The main thing is I would never have gone in if it hadn't been for the draft. And the reason for that is it just wasn't something on my radar screen that I wanted to do, and it interrupted my graduate school education, something that I did not want it to do. The other thing, though, now with the professional Army, with no draft, is it seems to focus the requirement or the responsibility for military service on those that don't have other aspirations.
From day one, you're taught it's not about you. It's about your soldiers. And as a leader, you always put the needs of those you lead ahead of your own. You never ask others to do what you wouldn't do yourself. You always lead by example. Teamwork is ever evident in the military. It's one of our hallmarks. You come together as a team. If you got to stay late, we're staying late to get things done. We're mission focused. Great examples, commanders in the military, leaders in the military, your soldiers eat first when the, chow line comes out. They go through chow first, and then you go through chow.
What does the Lord require but to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with God? I think that service has that element about it. And Jesus talked about a cup of cold water for the one who needs it.
The basic motivation for Christians in service needs to be following Jesus, not because Jesus told us to, but because we see in Jesus the love of God on the earth. And when we see that love of God and want to be part of that, we follow Jesus into service as Jesus was in service in his community.
I have worried about the Christian tendency to talk about their exclusivity, that they have a corner on the truth. And I think that particularly peace-working activities from the Mennonite Church, I think you have to back way away from your Christian exclusivity claims if you want to go work in an area where you're trying to bring peace between two groups that are in conflict.
Differences do exist, and we do have assumptions. Oftentimes our internal dialogue may be extremely problematic than what we sort of craft when we are interacting with the world.
We can all think of times when we made assumptions about ourselves, about the community with whom we're working, the people we worked with, about the amount of preparation there was, that they were wrong. And it can be quite jarring to realize that the assumptions you were working on are completely, they don't apply. We always have to do this work with a lot of humility. And yet, if we don't have any expertise at all, why are we there? We're there to learn side by side.
So the first step is really admitting to both ourselves and whomever it is that we decide to, that we are in an interaction with, that like I have these perceptions of folks who I think are like you, and just putting that out there, and then allow those dialogues to emerge organically.
The example of Haiti, there was a great outburst of interest in helping. People in our society, and I think Americans care deeply about people in the world, but it's easy to forget rather soon, because people pledged and pledged, and then the pledges weren't fulfilled, a lot of them. But I think that people do care greatly. When the tsunami was going, there was a great deal of concern about it. We have short memories on that sort of thing, but I think there's a feeling in our society of compassion.
Our world needs repair right now. We work with our community partners to build a stronger, more vibrant, more democratic, more inclusive world, and a more sustainable world, a more equitable world. And in the process of doing that, we acquire the skills for a lifetime of engagement